Today, we're going to be discussing the possible fate of DTM following the departure of Audi. This is Triple Crown Racing, let's get into it. Hello everybody, and welcome along to a motorsport news video that does not relate to either COVID-19 or Kyle Larson. Yeah, it's been over a month that I've deemed a news story either worthwhile or not completely done to death to actually talk about on this channel, and, well, pretty much all of the recent news stories had either been about COVID-19 or Kyle Larson to some extent. It was announced recently that Audi would be withdrawing from DTM at the end of the 2020 season to focus on customer racing and Formula E. This leaves BMW as the last man standing in DTM. Sound familiar? DTM has been driven by three manufacturers over the past few years, those being Mercedes, Audi, and BMW. Mercedes pulled out at the end of the 2018 season, with Aston Martin filling their shoes for the 2019 season. However, Aston Martin pulled out after just 1 year of competition, leaving BMW and Audi as the sole players left in the series. Also, over the last few years, Super GT and DTM have been working together to unify GT500 and DTM into one set of regulations known as Class 1. Finally, after making those arrangements since 2014, Class 1 was seemingly ready to go, but the departure of Audi has put the future of that category into certain jeopardy. Unfortunately, DTM has failed to attract more manufacturers to the series due to astronomical costs and a failure to bring those costs down. I also theorize that the reason Audi left and the reason that no new manufacturers were attracted to DTM was for everybody's favorite reason: a lack of road relevancy. These cars are about as far from the road car on which they are based as a block of cheese from a spaceship. I'd be surprised if there were any components that these actually share with the road car, and I believe that this significantly contributed to the downfall of the series. As I said, Audi are going to be focusing on customer racing and Formula E. I'm sure you probably know what Formula E is by this point, but if you don't know what customer racing is, allow me to enlighten you. Audi supplies GT3, GT4, and touring cars to customer teams to race in series across the globe. Those are all formulas that are based on road cars and use road car components. So if you were to go out and buy an Audi R8 tomorrow, or an Audi RS3, you'd basically be driving a car that shares its components with a race car. Also, the electric movement in the automotive industry and the Volkswagen Group's major pushes in that movement of course Audi are going to participate in Formula E, which is actually the reason they left LMP1 and the WEC. Again, both of these areas are very road relevant. DTM is both very expensive and not particularly road relevant, leaving no real motivation for Audi to stick around or any new car manufacturers to come in. A similar thing happened in supercars with Volvo, Mercedes, and Nissan all failing to be competitive and leaving the sport in a matter of years. Of course, the main reason that supercars is now in hot water is because Holden left, and that's more of an industry matter. But we wouldn't be in this problem if other manufacturers had come to the series. The same can actually probably be said for DTM as well. So what is to be done? Well, this goes for both DTM and supercars. It either needs to become cheaper or more road relevant. Many of these solutions are explored in a document that a good friend of mine put together and posted on Twitter. His name is SRA SmokingPuppy841. Go check him out in the description. I know he's not a proper journalist or anything, but he really does know his stuff. If you think I know stuff about motorsport, nah, this guy really knows his stuff. A popular choice for the series would be switching to the GT3 formula because the cars are fast, way cheaper than DTM cars, used across the globe, and there are tons of teams and manufacturers involved. Many people have suggested this, but my personal opinion is that I think it would be taking away from what is unique about the series, which are ironically the cars. That said, DTM did use the Group A formula at one point, which during the 80s and 90s were used across the globe. However, there is another series that runs primarily in Germany, known as the ADAC GT Masters Championship, which uses the GT3 category. Unless these two championships were to merge together, it would mean that there were two GT3 championships in Germany, which I think would cause a few problems and ultimately wouldn't work. Another option that a few people have suggested and is also explored in Smoking Puppy's document is a switch to TCR. TCR is cheap, popular, and like GT3, has lots of teams and manufacturers involved, and is extremely road relevant. These cars share a decent number of components with their road-going equivalents. If DTM wanted to switch back to the championship that it used to be during the Group A days, this would be the way to do it. However, it would require a merger with the ADAC TCR Championship, because I feel as though it would be great to have two TCR championships in one country. Basically the same problem I have with the championship switching to GT3. DTM could also just do what Super GT does with the GT500 and GT300 cars. DTM could essentially just run a multi-class championship with the Class 1 regs, with GT3 or another category making up the second class. However, this would most likely require Japanese GT500 cars to start racing in DTM, as it would still be heavily dependent on the Class 1 regs. That's probably why this idea might not work. I'll make two more suggestions, starting with SRA Smoking Puppy's personal suggestion, as the rest of the options on this list had already been suggested by other people to a certain extent and had been compiled into this document. So this is actually SRA Smoking Puppy's personal suggestion. And I quote, "I'd be knocking on the door of Alan Go and asking whether the championship could adopt the NGTC regulations of the British Touring Car Championship. It's cheap, it's touring cars, and it isn't directly competing against anything else in Germany, as well as having plenty of manufacturer interest, lots of cars available, BMW competing, and hybrids coming in 2022. For me, it's the perfect fit for what DTM is looking for." And he's right, it wouldn't directly compete with anything else in Germany, not even ADAC TCR, as the British Touring Car Championship and the TCR UK Championship, in Britain obviously, have still been able to coexist. However, this is my suggestion, I genuinely think that an entire reinvention of the series could be on the cards. DTM might look at these options and, in a bid to remain unique, discard all of them and completely start over. Obviously, given the current global climate, it would certainly be difficult to try and get a formula ready for next year. Perhaps next year could just be a year of damage control for DTM while they work on something entirely new, and that is either cheap or road relevant. I won't dive into road relevancy because I think it's just too complex to talk about now. However, I will draw a parallel with something that I think is wonderfully cheap and a similar solution that could be on the cards for DTM. There is a series in Australia called the Aussie Racing Cars Championship, and they are essentially silhouettes built around a tiny chassis and engine, and these things are fast too. Sometimes they even corner faster than the supercars, which you obviously see racing in the Virgin Australia Supercars Championship. Obviously, I'm not calling for DTM to replicate this formula. It would be absurd. I couldn't imagine these tiny little muscle cars racing in Germany. My point is, a new chassis for one of these is $4,000. So maybe DTM could adopt the philosophy of fast and extremely cheap silhouette touring cars built on a spec chassis. It would be really easy to entice manufacturers to this because all they'd have to do is supply a body and not much else. I know it's a far cry from what some race fans probably like, but it might be the only option for DTM to stay afloat. So, there are some options that could save DTM. Do you like any of them? Do you think any of them will work? Will DTM end up going under and the ADAC TCR Championship just becomes the controlling touring car interest in Germany? Comment below. I do read all of the comments and will most likely respond to you. Also, I beg you to go and check out SRA Smoking Puppy. He let me cite his document and he presented some excellent points. Link in the description. All of the socials are in the description below, including the TCR Instagram, Twitter, and Discord server, as well as my personal Twitter. Please go check those links out if you haven't already done so. Anyway, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.